Guys, this is Cheese Games, and welcome to the very first episode of the survival game tutorial in Unity 5. So here I've made a blank project, and in this first episode, I'll show you how to make a player that can walk around in our environment. So first, we're going to create an empty in the scene. We're going to name this player. And we're going to put it in the 0, 0, 0 position. We're also going to create a terrain. And first of all, the terrain automatically defaults to 500 by 500. We only need something like 50 by 50. That's a lot smaller. And we can set the terrain to -25 by -25 in the X and Z axis, and now the player is centered right in the middle of the terrain. So now if we need to put a character controller on the player, and now let's make some scripts. So first we're going to make a new C# script. We're going to call this player move, and this is going to handle the movement of the player, obviously. Let's open it up. And we're going to make some variables. So first we need to reference to the character controller. We're going to make a private character controller. Just call this controller. And we also need to make a public integer called speed, and this is the speed at which we're traveling. We also need a private vector3 input. We also need a private float, call this forward input, and another private float called side input. Now we need some jumping variables for jumping, so we're going to make a private float, call it y velocity, and we're going to initialize it to 0. We also need another private float, call it jump speed. So this is the speed at which we're jumping. And that's all we need for movement. So down here in the start, we need to initialize, see, we made this character controller private, so we need to initialize it in the start. And character controller, controller is get component character controller, and that's it. And that's all I need to do in the start. So in the update, we need to make our axes. So forward input is equal to input.getAxes. This is vertical, and side input is equal to input.getAxes horizontal. Alright, so we just initialize those. Now we need to make y velocity plus equals physics dot gravity dot y times time dot delta time. We add the time dot delta time for frame consistency. And now we're actually gonna set the controls. So if we press the jump button, well, first of all, if we're on the ground, we need to be on the ground. So if controller is grounded, which is a thing that comes with the character controller, and we press the button down, we press the button jump, y velocity, so our gravity, equals jump speed. We might as well initialize speed up here. Equal 10. Alright. So now we got the jumping working. We need to make the moving working. So we have an initialized input, and that is equal to a new vector 3. The x would be side speed, the y would be y velocity, and the forward would be, the z would be why isn't it appearing? Forward input. So input is tackling all of these. And now input also needs to be our transform dot rotation times input. Alright, so now once we've done all this, we just need to go controller dot move input times time dot delta time. Alright, so now if we save and hit play, make sure you also need to put the main camera under the player. Oh no, this is an integer. I thought it was a float. Okay, and there we go. So now we can also the character controller, see where it says center, this needs to be 1.001. So now it's on the ground, and the reason we put a 001 is so it's because if you just put it 1 exactly, it could be on it or it could be inside it, and then that leads to some weird glitches that could possibly happen. But if you just a tiny bit above it, then nothing should go wrong. So now we can jump, as you can see. We can move right, we can move forward. Yeah, okay, so now we need to move around. So we're going to create another script, call this player look. I'm going to create an add. Well, let's open it up. Oh geez. Okay. Let's get rid of these comments. So we need to make a public float x sensitivity. Is that how you spell it? Hope so. 3f. And another float on the y sensitivity is equal to 2.5. And normally in games the x sensitivity is actually a bit more than the y, because generally you're gonna be turning horizontally than you are vertically. You're gonna be looking left and right more than you are gonna be looking right up and down. Another thing we need is a private float called y range. It's equal to anything you want. 90, that means you can look. So what this is doing is it's capping how high you can look or how low you can look. So you can't just look infinitely. You'll cap once you look straight up, if you set it to 90. But if you set it to 80, it'll cap up here. It's hard to explain, I'll show you later. We also need a private float called rotation X, and another one called rotation Y. Okay. And we need a public game object called this player camera. So generally in these games, you won't be able to see the mouse cursor while you're playing it. So we're just going to say cursor.lock state is equal to cursor lock mode dot locked. So that's locking it, but if you want to make it invisible, you're going to go cursor dot visible is equal to false. So let's get the looking working. So rotation X is equal to input dot get axis. See what it was called. Project settings input. That mouse X. Input dot get axis mouse X times. Forgot to close it. Times X sensitivity. And also transform dot rotate 0 rotation X and 0. So now we do the Y rotation. So rotation Y minus equals input dot get axes mouse Y times Y sensitivity. And rotation Y is equal to math f dot clamp rot Y. So we want to look down, so minus Y range. Minus Y range and just Y range. So this isn't a capital Y. And last thing, player camera dot transform dot local rotation is equal to quaternion dot what was it? It was dot. I think it was dot Euler from rotation Y to 0 to 0. So that's our player look done, and whoops. That's our player look done and our movement done. Okay, now I put this under here. And now I think it's gonna work. Uh-oh. Mouse X is not set up. Oh no, there's space. And now we can look up and down, and we can jump and move left and right. So there's your player. It did take quite a while, but that's because we made our own instead of just importing a character controller. And the character controller just has a bunch of unnecessary stuff. The default one that you can just import, as like a head bob and footsteps, which are all good things, but it's just too much and it's hard to edit. So there's your simple player controller. So now we have this terrain here. Hopefully you know how to use a terrain. It's really simple. There you go. A simple player controller on a terrain. So you can see this terrain is just a basic white, but we can make it a new color by making our own texture. So we're going to make a new thing, 128 by 128, call this custom texture. I'm going to click OK, zoom in, and we're just going to make it a grassy color. I already have a grassy color here. And we're going to fill it a bit later possibly. And we're going to save for web as a PNG 24. We don't need transparency, but we can put it there anyway. And that's it, we're going to save. And we're going to find our project. So I save it here in the desktop, in my survival game tutorial, in our assets. Just save it here, custom texture.png, save. And there, so automatically we select the terrain, we go here on the paintbrush, click edit, add textures. Your custom texture appears here. Click add, and the whole thing comes to life. You can also create a second one. Whoops. A second one. Custom texture 2. This might be maybe for mountains or something. And you don't have to make it just this one color. You can also put some stuff on it, like just some marks on it or something. But I like these just plain color. I'm gonna save in the same place. And now we can add another texture. And we can just color it in. Select this one, color it in. And set the opacity and change the colors of these mountains. So that's it for the first episode. Thank you guys for watching. We have a very simple game. That's it. Bye.